All right, the book of Ruth. We're still in chapter 1, and we are down to verse 16. We discussed most of this last time, talked about the fact that Ruth was arguing with Naomi. I'm not sure arguing is the right word, but the term entreat carries more with it than just they were having a casual conversation. Ruth was pleading with her, don't let me go anywhere unless it's going with you. And as soon as Naomi realized that, you notice there in verse 18 that she stopped speaking to her. We said that wasn't, she quit talking in a huff and she was angry with her, but quit trying to persuade her, quit trying to press the issue. She accepted what was going to happen and was going with that, and everything was okay. They came to the city of Bethlehem. The women and people of the town were excited because they recognized this was Naomi, and we talked about even though she had been gone over 10 years, she was welcomed back, and people were happy to have her back at that point. And then Naomi goes into her discussion about don't call me Naomi anymore, but call me what? Mara, which means bitter. And she goes through the things that she says God has done to her and done with her for all of that. And so we talked about that and the idea of questioning God and being frustrated when we don't understand God and all of those things. So we've talked about that, and probably we'll talk about that yet again before the class is over. But you notice it came down and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. And this has nothing to do with anything biblical, but just so you might want to know, the barley harvest usually occurs typically in March and April in the land of Israel. So we're talking about it's just occurred. So we're in the same time frame in the year calendar that Ruth and Naomi are there in Bethlehem. And so, again, that makes absolutely no difference one way or the other, but some people like to think about stuff like that, so it was there at the barley harvest. So, chapter 2. There was a relative of Naomi's husband, a man of great wealth of the family of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, please let me go into the field and glean heads of grain after him, in whose sight I may find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. And then she left and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. And would you say this is just pure dumb luck?
Sounds like a setup to me.
Okay, sounds like a setup to me. I agree. You look back at stuff in the Old Testament, and this happened, and that happened, and that happened, and oftentimes I think we forget the providence of God and His workings and the things He's doing behind the scenes. And so I have a hard time imagining that she just happened to be walking down the road and all of a sudden there was a field and she happened to pick that field. It could have happened. I'm not going to argue that it couldn't have happened. But at the same time, I think God probably had something to do with her finding that field so that she could meet Boaz, and the rest, as we could say, would be history. John and then Mike.
Not that it really makes any difference, but is this then kind of like a community field? I just noticed this time where it said the part of the field belonged to Boaz.
Give me a second, we'll get to that because that's important. Go ahead, Mike.
It appears to me that Naomi worked this out.
Okay.
Because she said, okay, I've got this kinsman, and so he's got this field. So you go find the field, not by happen chance or anything, but it was planned out, worked out.
Okay.
Because of the custom of kinship. I mean, the kinship ties and everything were very important in the Jewish community, and so it was very planned.
Okay.
That she find this field. She went looking for Boaz's field, not just out walking and stumbled upon it, because of who he was and his relationship to Naomi.
Okay. Mike has suggested that maybe Naomi's primed the pump already and talking about the near kinsman and suggesting maybe where to find his field, where to find what he's working. And so that could be an explanation as well, as she had already kind of pushed her in the right direction to get where she needed to be, because Naomi's thinking beyond just getting food. She's thinking about the long-term implications of that. Elwin?
Exactly, going from poverty to riches.
Okay, going from poverty to riches. Absolutely. So, let's go on. Back to John's question. Somebody get it for me, Leviticus 19, verses 9 and 10. And then somebody get Deuteronomy 24, 19 through 22. And if you wouldn't mind reading that for us. Somebody got Leviticus? Yeah, Leviticus 19, 9 and 10.
Now when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest, nor shall you glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy and for the stranger. I am the Lord your God.
Okay, so that gives us an indication of why Ruth is doing what she's doing. It's part of the law of the land for the corners of the field to be left. If you, who's got Deuteronomy? Let's go ahead and read that. Deuteronomy 24. 19 through 22. Go ahead, Bubba. Thank you.
When thou cuttest down thine harvest in thy field, and hast forgot a sheep in the field, thou shalt not go again to fetch it. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all thy work of thine hands. Then when thou beatest thine olive tree, thou shalt not go over to the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. When thou gatherest the grapes at thine vineyard, thou shalt not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. Thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command thee to do this.
Okay, so those two passages give us the standard practice of the farming communities of what they were supposed to do. They weren't supposed to glean everything that they grew. The corners, if you're going out there and left a sheaf in the field, don't go back and get it. A cluster of grapes falls to the ground, don't pick it up. All of those things. And yeah, you're thinking about that, and I'll just throw this out there, and I'm not advocating this at all, but please respond to it. That's kind of unfair to the farmers. Why not?
Because God said he was blessing them.
Oh, there you go. God had promised them when they went into the land of Canaan, if you live according to my will, what will I do for you? You'll have rain, you'll have harvest, you'll have everything that you need. And so when he built into the law this idea of leaving the corners for the poor and the needy and the widows and all of that, he was planning on taking care so that the farmers didn't suffer a loss as a result of what they were leaving, but rather the people gained it. And so this was, again, part of that, shall we say, symbiotic relationship between God and his people. If you're doing what I want you to do, you cannot fail. You will not fail, because I will be with you. I'll make everything right. And the problem with that was Israel then, how many times, didn't do what they were supposed to do. And there was famine in the land as a result. And part of that, again, this is in the day of the Judges, and we talked about the famine that drove Elimelech's family all the way to Moab from there. An indication of they weren't doing right, which is why those things were happening. Dave?
I just wanted to point out that I think you're using
New King James, yeah.
That the ESV, instead of a wealthy man, calls him a worthy man.
A worthy man, okay, yeah. Yeah, and I think both of those are true in the sense. He is not only a wealthy man, but he is a worthy man. He's a good man. Diana?
Not that this has to do with anything. I'm not quite sure if it has anything to do with biblical understanding. But as I was visiting in Florida, I noticed on the side of the road, there was a sign that says, take what you need. If you care to leave something, great. If not, just, get what you needed. And I thought to myself, who would just put good fruit out here, or fruit that was here? Somebody would come by and take all of it.
Yeah.
But I think it's the custom that they have. And there's nobody around. It's just sitting there in different barrels on the side of the road saying, take what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about people that can't afford it or need, and then I think about people that are just honest. But for some reason, these barrels were filled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Diana points out she was in Florida, if you couldn't hear her with the rumbling of the heater back here, that there was a place where, I assume oranges or something like that.
It's an orange farm.
Yeah, and there were barrels on the side of the road, take what you need, leave something if you want to, and just depended on the honesty of the people, because, there'll be people drive along, take the barrel and everything with them. just because they can, because nobody's around. And so why would you do that? Well, obviously they have a higher calling perhaps than that. And okay, if I get taken advantage of, that's okay because I'm doing good. Flo?
Well, teachers, God teaches a lesson, man, and now it's a lesson on benevolence.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just for a reason.
Sure. A lesson of benevolence. Don't we sometimes get it taken advantage of when we practice benevolence to some people? Yeah, we do. The congregation I came here from in western Oklahoma was right on Interstate 40. And people would exit Interstate 40, come north. The Baptist church was the first church they came to. We were the second. Methodist was the third. First Christian the fourth. And they would boom, 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 hit those spots. And they would come in and want help. And again, I may have told you this before. Fortunately, the local chief of police was a member of the church, as was the county sheriff. And they'd come up with a system that said, people need help. We've got vouchers for anybody in the community. You send them down to the police station. We'll check them out, make sure they're not wanted for anything. If they're willing to do that, we'll give them the voucher and whatever they need. And again, that was that little town's system to that. But I know good and well that the church spent money on gas and food and everything for people who that's all they were doing. They were going coast to coast, taking what they could get from people. And so you've got two responses to that. One response is, I'm just going to quit doing it. But is that a valid response?
I say yes.
Okay, David says yes. Scripture says, as we have therefore opportunity, do good to all, especially the household of faith. And so the inclination, the tendency is to say no, and in some cases that's justified, I think, depending on the circumstances. But somebody takes advantage of me, and so the Lord's money has gone to somebody who is undeserving. Where does the blame of that fall? On that person, doesn't it? Not on the person doing the giving. And here's the point I think that we need to make. That good that you do to that person, who knows what that might do for them somewhere down the road. Maybe nothing. And that's okay. That's on them. Or it may be that they remember the good that they got from all of these churches, all these people who helped them when they were in those circumstances, and decided, there's something to these people and what they do. And there may be that opportunity that we've planted a seed that's going to grow for people. And so this generosity and benevolence is a good thing, even though at times we are frustrated because it seems like it's good money going after bad. But God said, don't worry about that. You do good, and I'll deal with the circumstances. Flo?
This is a very difficult story for me to tell because when I was about 14, I had 5 siblings, and we lost everything. They lost a job, we lost everything. So we had to move from Texas to California to work farms to make a living. And when we got to California, if anybody knows about California, Highway 99 runs north and south. And it was middle of summer, hot. We had 1 car, 5 kids in the car, no food. We ran out of food, ran out of water, ran out of gas, and we stopped at the freeway. And my dad got out of the car and says, Junior, you take care of your mom and the kids. And he took off and walked down, I think, 10 miles on that freeway. And he found a church. And they gave us money for food, water, and gas. And my mom was sitting in the front seat, and she had her Bible open. My mom was very religious. And I turned around to her and I said, because I'm 14, right? And what do I know? And I said, Mom, what good does that do you, the Bible? And I regret that saying that. But when you think about people out there that give, and I was hoping for years that church was the Church of Christ. But I don't know. But a church gave us money to get where we're going to Fresno and picked ourselves up and made it back. And so benevolence and love, and God wants us to give when we can, if we're able, resources, whatever we have to give to others. And somebody hadn't helped us, I don't know what would have happened to us. But one thing I know for sure, it taught me to never give up, trust in God, like my mom did, and also that my dad, and rightfully so, we were going to a service station and robbed that station or a store to get us what we needed, but he didn't. He taught me that even in times like that, you don't break the law and you don't go against God's will. And that's what he taught me. From then on, I've always remembered that story because it was difficult for me and my kid and my siblings. So churches, us Christians today need to keep that in mind, that somebody out there needs help. And yeah, we might get not what we wanted from that, but that's our role.
Absolutely. It's and you know, how many stories are there out there like that? Just hundreds of where people have been helpful. Our default mindset ought to be, I'll help. And again, there are times when you have to be careful about that and judgmental, or not judgmental, you have to make decisions about that. But at the same time, our default position ought to be, what can we do to help? Now, we can't help everybody. We don't have a budget big enough to help everybody. But if we have the opportunity to help, then we should, whether it's as a corporate entity, the church, or whether it's individual. And it's a good feeling to know that I did something, even if that person doesn't appreciate it, was just taking what they could get and moving on to the next person. They could take what they get from them. We're told we're created in Christ Jesus for good works. And so that should be our mantra. And if I get taken advantage of, okay, I got taken advantage of. So what? I did what I was supposed to do. We'll let God sort out all that stuff one of these days and let him deal with that. Diana?
Will the scripture go with it to let us get, for the person that gets the most, they get back?
Sure.
So, I just think you're right, you can't help everyone, you have to discern sometimes. But the Bible also says that that person asks for water or food or whatever, then give them just what they ask for.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, if you don't have, you get it, you can. And once you give it, just release it. Just move.
Sure. The story of the rich man and Lazarus. Rich man fared sumptuously every day, and Lazarus lived on what? Crumbs that fell from his table. And of course, you know the rest of the story. They both die. One goes into Abraham's bosom, the other goes into torment. And you had good things while you were alive on this earth, and Lazarus didn't. Now the roles are reversed in that context. And so we look at that, and we look at our budgets, and we look at our bills, and how much money we have to spend. And I'll speak of this personally. How much of my money that I spend do I spend on things that I don't really need?
Now you're meddling.
No, I'm meddling. I'm sorry. I'll give you a personal example of this. I have 3 LED lights hanging in my garage. And Kelly's going, because we had this discussion yesterday. And I thought over on the far side is a little dark. So I've been saying I need to buy another light. She said, we don't need another light in the garage. And blah, blah, blah. So I was at Walmart and they had one, so I bought one, which she was not terribly happy about. But my garage is bright now. Could see just fine without it. But that's about $19 that I spent because of something I wanted rather than something I needed. And so when you think about it that way, yeah, none of us are rich in this room. I don't see any Lamborghinis in the parking lot. But we all can do something. And part of what we do by giving on a Sunday morning is supporting benevolent efforts within the church, not necessarily here, but other places, but a lot of times here for our own members who are in need, who can't afford something that really has to be done. And so it's that generous spirit. And obviously Boaz was generous, and we'll read about that as we go through, and him talking about Naomi. He was letting people glean in the fields along just like he was supposed to. Take what you need. Ruth is going to also be with the people who are doing the picking. She's given protection by them. She's given water and food by them. She's allowed to rest in the house by them, and we'll get all to that later in this chapter. But it was a again, going back to Dave's comment about the English Standard saying he was a worthy man, I think that's a good characterization. He was a good man. And that's why Naomi thought of him. That's why Ruth was drawn to him. And that nobility is part of the lineage of Jesus. John?
Jesus said you always have the poor among you. But when you think of what these poor had to do to get didn't she bring a bowl of grain to Naomi? I think it sounds as though she worked hours and hours picking up individual grains off the dirt just to make one bowl of grain. So this system of taking care of the poor required the poor to do a lot of work.
Sure. Yeah, Ruth had to go get it. She couldn't. They didn't just bring it to her. Well, Boaz a little later, but he had ulterior motives for why he did that. But she had to pick it herself. She had to do the work and go get it and find the place to glean from. And so it wasn't just a roadside stand that Diane was talking about here. Take it. She had to go out and get that, which she did, taking care of her mother-in-law because she loved her. Renette, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say that when he asked the servant who she was, the servant told him that, or the reaper, whatever you call it, she took a little rest in the house. So she was working hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Interesting, the address they made to each other was about the Lord. Blessing. I find that interesting. I don't know that we make too much of that, but at the same time, our speech ought to include speech about the Lord, shouldn't it? We ought to talk about it. Dave?
You know, I think it's important to indicate here that these poor people were not waiting furtively at the roadside until all of the reaping were done, and then they could go and get with it. They were intermingled with the workers. I mean, Boaz had respect for them. I think that's important, that there was a relationship between Boaz and the reapers. Boaz didn't look upon them as rejects. He looked upon them as good people.
Sure, yeah. Good people just trying to earn a living. And that's what they were doing, and that's a good thing. And so anyway, the Lord bless you, the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" Wonder why he took notice of her. Sandy said, "Because she's good looking." Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. That's all right, isn't it? He saw, and she was new and probably somebody he'd never seen before. I might guess that some of those who gleaned from the field were, shall we say, regulars. And so he knew who they were and was all right with that. But here's a new person. So who is that? And it didn't help the fact that she might have been really pretty. Bob and then Jim.
You already said.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
You go back a couple passages, it says maybe he will find favor in you. So they're already praying for this anyway.
Sure. Yeah, and they're praying for this, and again, the cynical person would say, well, they're just playing the game. And in a certain sense, they are playing the game. But this wasn't just, I hope I find me a husband. This was part of God's plan under that Levirate marriage for the continuing of the name of Elimelech. And so they were doing what God had set up in the system he had set up for them to do that. And they knew that Boaz was one of those people who could be one of those, we'll talk about more of this, the kinsman redeemer. And so it's not just she's out trying to find a husband. She is hoping for that, but it's a bigger picture than that. And it's more tied up in the actual Word of God than it is just wanting to have a family. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to have a family, but it's part of God's plan. Go ahead, Jim.
She's just getting food, too.
Yeah, and she's eating. They don't have food.
I just think so. It's a matter of survival.
Sure, it's a matter of survival. And so if that process of surviving includes a betterment of self in this process, that was part of God's plan. And so no fault in that. And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered and said, "It is a young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." And she said, "Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves." So she came and has continued from the morning until now, though she rested a little while in the house. And so again, she came in, and I wonder if she had to ask.
She didn't have to.
Okay, Renetta says she didn't have to. I don't know. I don't read anything in the text about them having to ask or not. But if either way, what does that say about Ruth that she asked? It's a good manners. Yeah, it's just the polite thing to do. Can I do this with you? And please let me glean together after the reapers and among the sheaves. And they said, sure. They had been obviously primed by Boaz as to what to be allowed on his property. And they did what he had instructed them to do and allowed her to do that. And then even at the time when it was hot and everyone was resting, rested in the house with everyone, even though she was not a hired hand, wasn't not part of that family per se. But she was given the same courtesy that everyone was given there. And this is before Boaz even has gotten involved in that. This is just prior to Boaz becoming involved in that. So Boaz comes to his reapers, the Lord be with you, the Lord be with you. And then he catches the eye or the form of Ruth, and he's interested. Then Boaz said to Ruth, you will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here. But stay close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. And so he takes it just a little bit, a step further. You go in there with my maids, and you follow them. You reap where they reap. And look, I've commanded my young men not to touch you. Now, what's the implication there?
She's
Right.
She's a pretty woman. We already said we think she was a pretty woman. And she's a single woman, and she's by herself, and she's poor, and she's what? Vulnerable, isn't she? And so as a result of that vulnerability, Boaz seems to be in control of all of his people that's working with him, but at the same time, he makes a statement, you don't let anything happen to her. And maybe he's thinking about others who are gleaning in the field from that group who might be known to him, or people that he doesn't have any control over, and said, you make sure she's okay while we do this. John?
Now, I was going to say, he's still not telling you, she's not telling her to go reap with the people.
Mm-hmm.
He said, glean after the women
Yeah.
already reaped there, but go into this field.
Yeah, John makes a good point that he's not telling her to go reap with them, but reap after them, reap where you're supposed to. Keep doing that, but I'll make sure you're okay. When you need a drink, come get a drink. Again, she's already resting in the house, so that's a good thing for them in that context. And Boaz is looking after her. And the question is why? And the text answers that for us. So she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes? She's asking that question. Why is he doing this? Why have I found favor in your eyes? You should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner. That implies what about the relationship between Israelites and foreigners? It was not brother and sister slap on the back goodwill. It was tolerated. It was part of their culture, but they did not. This wasn't a familial relationship between the foreigner and she said, why are you doing this since I'm a foreigner? Bill?
But God had given commandments to the Israelites about the alien that's among them.
Yeah.
They had responsibilities for them.
Sure. And a lot of those commands, like the gleaning of the corn of the field, said for you and for the alien that dwells among you, talking about somebody who wasn't a native Israelite, to take care of them, treat them with honor, treat them with respect, and that's what they were supposed to do. And Boaz answered and said to her, it has been fully reported to me all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and have come to a people whom you did not know before. So, remember, this is a small town. And what happens in a small town? Everybody knows everything. And with the stirring that was caused by Naomi coming back with Ruth, word spread throughout town. The story had been told, perhaps, and retold, and Boaz had heard about it, and he knew what was going on in that context. It's been reported to me all that you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you left father and mother, the land of your birth, and come to the people you didn't know before. So Boaz acknowledges you're with your mother-in-law, you've lost your husband, and you've given up everything you've ever known to be here taking care of her. Pretty neat story, isn't it? I mean, pretty amazing. Just think, if that's all there was to this story, it would be amazing. The dedication and faith. And we talked about what Ruth said in that statement we read back in verse 16 of chapter 1, and treat me not to leave you, what all that meant. And so Boaz has heard that, and he's impressed. Dave?
Well, there's apparently been some time taking place from the time that Boaz said, "Who is this woman?" to it's been fully reported to me, so it indicates to me that he has probably done some research.
Okay. Yeah, Dave suggested maybe he did some research after he found out who she was. He asked a few questions. I don't know. It doesn't say, but that could be the case. Found out more about the story. He said, "Hey, did you hear that story about? Is that true? What have you heard about that? Maybe there was some discussion of that. We don't know, but he's convinced, at least at this point, of what he's saying, of the good that she's done." And then verse 12, "The Lord repay your work, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." I like that statement. The Lord repay your work. Not Boaz, not Israel. Although Boaz is responsible for this, Israel is involved in this because it was their law. But the Lord repay your work with a full reward. Now, full reward, what does that mean? Well, I assume it means everything that could possibly be rewarded, everything that could possibly be given. But a full reward indicates that it's not just, pat on the back, good job, and that's it. But it was something much bigger than that. Ellen?
Well, you can also look at it as a type of evangelism.
Mm-hmm.
Here's someone who's lost. Here's someone who doesn't know God. Here's someone that's showing the attitude of like a Christian should act. They don't understand how to be saved or anything yet, but I think that what he's doing at the same time he's saying is God will repay you back in full on you becoming a faithful servant of his.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a full reward given to you, again, by the Lord God of Israel. And I don't know if that's specific wording that Boaz thought about, because she said, "Since I am a foreigner, why are you doing this to me?" And then he says, "Full reward given to you by the Lord God of Israel." Not Chemosh, not the Baals, not the Asherahs. And again, maybe reading too much into that, but it seems like there's a reason he says the Lord God of Israel. That's where this is coming from. It's not coming from me, Boaz. It's coming from God. And that's how we have to look at things, isn't it? Every good and perfect gift comes from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. And so we have to understand. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I kind of contemplate that if it wasn't for the fact that Ruth is mentioned in the genealogy of Christ, this book probably wouldn't even be in our Bible at all.
Sure.
Because, otherwise there's no indication here of a message, an Old Testament message, other than a love story and good people. But that would be the full reward that because of God's manipulation in the affairs of Naomi and Ruth and Boaz and the death of sons and so forth, that now the full reward is that she's got a prominent place in God's eternal purpose. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, it is. And that full reward can be interpreted in a much grander scale than just what's going on here. Because Ruth is mentioned in the lineage of Jesus Christ. And she didn't live, obviously, long enough to see that, or maybe not even understand it. But to know that she was part of that story of the saving of the world. How amazing is that? Aren't we all interested in finding somebody very famous in our background? Ruth is that very famous person in the background of Jesus. And that's, as Dave says, the reason this book is in here, to tell us about that. And it's part of that continuity of God from the very beginning, telling the serpent, you're going to lose in the end. And this is part of that storyline that gets us to where he loses in the end because of his evil and the things that he's done. So she's going to get a full reward by the Lord God of Israel. And then she said, let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservants. And so she acknowledges, she's thankful, she's grateful for what God has done for her, for what Boaz has done for her. And she's thankful, and again, this is just the stepping stone process, as she's going to get to be eventually his wife. But there are some hurdles to get through over before they get there, and we'll talk about those obviously next week when we come back to this. Boaz said to her at mealtime, come here and eat of the bread, and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed parched grain to her, and she ate and was satisfied and kept some back. And when she arose up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And so as John pointed out, from the back of the sheaves, now you let her glean among. You just put her in the group, and don't worry about it at that point in time. Do not reproach her. Also let grains from the bundles fall purposely for her. So she gleaned at the field until evening and beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And then she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. So she brought out and gave to her what she had kept back after she had been satisfied. And so, again, all is going good. Boaz is saying, yeah, you gleaned. Behind my women, he's saying, no, you gleaned. And tells Joe over here, said, Joe, if there's a bag on the edge, just kind of knock it off and leave it there and let her have it. Kind of a thing. And again, Boaz is understanding that what he's doing here is a good thing to do, and he's not worried about his bottom line, his ultimate profit margin. He's worried about doing what's right here. And he knows that he's going to have enough to be satisfied and for his wealth and his status and all of that, because he knows God's going to bless him because he's doing what God wanted them to do. And that's an important understanding about what was going on at this point in time. Bob?
I see a little bit in this process of maintaining pride, because if he had harvested all the grain and then given to here, I give this to you, I give this to you, there's a certain, I don't know the phrase I'm looking for, indebtedness to the person, as opposed to going out with them, picking up what the law allowed, but they worked for the food that they were getting. And I think this is important in society, and I think it's important now. To me, it's a little sidebar about people working, earning a proper living, and in this scenario, because he could have just gleaned it and sent her off with a bag of grain, but the fact that she went and got it is important.
Yeah. Isn't there dignity in work? In doing what you're supposed to do? Yeah. And so he allowed her to do that. She took home the fruit of her harvest. She wasn't involved in the whole harvest, but she took home what she was allowed to take home from that because she worked for it along with everyone else. And so, again, the ultimate message here is for Boaz, he was wealthy, he was an honorable man, and he was going to help people whenever he could. And that he didn't look on as being something that took money out of his pocket. It was something that he felt was a blessing to people and ultimately a blessing to him, because God had ultimately blessed him with everything that he had. And so God was expecting him to use what he had to help others. And then Ruth came in and said, why don't you give me that big bag of wheat over there and I'm going home? No, she said, let me glean. Please let me work. Please let me do what the law allows to provide for my mother-in-law. And she did that. And so seemingly everyone around here is trying to do the right thing. And throughout the rest of the book, that story seems to continue, because Boaz has to do the right thing because he's not the nearest kinsman redeemer. And we'll talk about this, but he likely could have, because of his wealth and privilege, just skipped that process and said, nobody's going to care. but he doesn't because it's the right thing to do.